how to really unpack your brand and strive for hyper relevancy with your target segmentation in 2026. We now purchase to achieve a level of sameness and uniform that hasn't previously existed. And so an omnipresent brand in this cultural setting is really powerful. The millennial brand is dead, but I really don't see anyone talking about what is next. And so I think we all have the opportunity to be early in adopting what it's going to take for a brand to win coming into 2026, 2027, and beyond. I love working with Pilot House because while we are a performance marketing agency, we really pride ourselves on caring so much about brand and creative. At Pilot House, we don't just make ads, we craft them. Every edit, every word, every scroll-stopping detail is built with purpose and care, and I truly believe that care drives creativity and creativity drives results. Our attention to both scale and brand allows us to craft strategies that deliver you short-term results while making you long-term successful, which is so important for any DTC brand. If you are curious about learning more about working with Pilot House, you can fill out a lead form at pilothouse.co and let them know you want to go on a brand new ad venture. You don't actually have to say that. You don't have to make a pun. I'm not going to force you to make a pun. Just fill out the lead form. We'd love to chat with you. Hi, welcome back to Ad-venturous, the podcast produced by DTC and hosted by me, Aves. Today, I thought I would kick off a small series, just 3 parts here, on how to really unpack your brand and strive for hyper relevancy with your target segmentation in 2026. That doesn't sound really exciting when I put it that way. I was going to describe it as how to see your brand dominate in 2026, and I was kind of skeeving myself out saying the word dominate so much. And I think that also paints sort of an inaccurate picture of what I'm really hoping to give you guys over the course of these next 3 episodes. So I want to break down what I mean when, I'm talking about quote unquote your brand dominating in 2026, or even just achieving hyper relevancy with your target customers and persona and segmentation. I want to do this 3-part series because I think that there's a real opportunity for people who are willing to really get down and dirty and build a community around their brand. This is a theory I have been sort of percolating on for a few months now, but something we've all noticed is the death of the millennial brand. People have talked about this subject matter quite a bit, and when we talk about the millennial brand, we don't mean chuggy, skinny jeans, side parts, etc. We mean this really earnest approach to brand, where brand was seen as a friend. It was you were always coming at this POV as if you were, an actual person, not an entity that sells things. And so we have seen the millennial brand die, I think, a well-deserved death. It kind of gets on my nerves a little bit. But I wanted to talk about what I personally think is rising up to replace it, and that is the birth of the omnipresent brand. I have, like I mentioned, been percolating on this a lot and researching this a lot and thinking about where we are culturally, where consumers are, and where brands should be going next to be ahead of the trend. And I want to unpack all of that thinking and research over the next 3 episodes because why not? I think it's fun. And also, I'd like to say, before I start getting into a lot of this research and this sort of theory that I've put together and how to unlock success and relevancy for your brand, I wanted to remind you guys that I do this work day in, day out. I do talk about it, yes, but I also I am there in the trenches with you. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is from experience. A lot of what I'm going to talk about in the next 3 episodes is proven, at least in controlled settings when I'm running the show. And I really want to, give you guys all of the knowledge that I've sort of amassed and help you see some of the success that I've seen, because I had a really exciting Q4 and I would really love to kind of share the work that went into that with you guys and hopefully inspire some huge results and wins on your brand side heading into 2026. So I want to go back to this idea that I presented, an omnipresent brand. What do I mean when I say that? I think that's also an important definition to set before we get into the rest of what the series is going to be and what today's episode specifically is going to look like. So an omnipresent brand, in my mind and in my experience, is just sort of a response in a lot of ways to how consumer sentimentality has shifted. I think it's really interesting to look at where we are, what sort of stage of capitalism we exist in. And it's really interesting to look at the ways that people have started to attach themselves to brands in a way that's really never happened before. We used to really see this with people who lived inside of subcultures. So I'm living in Australia. I won't say the city because people keep telling me not to just announce where I live on the internet, and I think that that is really smart. So I'm going to take that advice. But I live like on sort of the Great Ocean Road, so I live in a very surfy environment. And I was thinking the other day about how surf really used to exist as a small subculture, right? We talk a lot as well in sort of the cultural critique zeitgeist about monoculture and what has happened because of the internet and everyone's kind of becoming one big hive mind. And so what's really interesting to think about for me is pre-internet, the culture that existed in towns and communities like the one that I live in now, where surfing and surf brands were contained to people living within that subculture, or even in some points, if you think about like the history of surf or even skateboarding countercultures in a way. But those brands existed to those people and they were symbols of being part of that community. When we fast forward to today, what's really interesting is the way that people utilize and leverage brand is to fit in, not to stand out. So previously, if I was like rocking a pair of Roxy swim trunks, those plaid ones, loved them as a kid. But if I was rocking those, especially where I live here, it's like I am signaling to people that I surf, that I'm part of the community, and that's who I am. But now what we do is we look to grab like the newest Stanley launch or a Walla, you know? It's like we have these things that become symbols not of who we are as an individual, but they come to symbolize that we belong to a larger collective, which is really interesting as someone who loves culture and loves sociology, to think about that like really dramatic shift in how things have gone. It's gone from really utilizing brand to, in a lot of ways, set yourself apart and let the world know which subculture or counterculture you belong to. And now there's this real push that, you know, everything has to be similar at the same time. And I've been really interested watching the like sort of fallout from the like Pantone color of the year being this like boring white. But yeah, it's been really interesting to watch people predict the like general reaction to that probably being a very colorful year, that people are starting to sort of protest out against this monoculture that we all seem to now exist within, and to strive to find ways to be individuals. So that is a really long-winded explanation of what I mean when I say omnipresent brand. I think that it is a response to this idea that we now purchase to fit in more than ever before, and we purchase to achieve a level of sameness and uniform that hasn't previously existed. And so an omnipresent brand in this cultural setting is really powerful. A really good example of this that I've been thinking about a lot is Rhode. I think it's somewhere here, but I do have multiple Rhode products. I also want to take the time to say I love Justin Bieber, and I think if you've never listened to his Christmas album, you can't critique him at all. Specifically, his cover of The Little Drummer Boy is like, it's so campy. I saw someone on TikTok, I wish I remembered who it was, say that that cover of The Little Drummer Boy sounds like it would be on RuPaul's Drag Race, and it is very true. It's an astounding piece of music. If you haven't listened to it, please do. But yeah, I love Justin Bieber, so I love Hailey Bieber. I'm all up in Rhode. But I think a really fun, interesting way to look at omnipresent brand is the way that Rhode rolled out their phone cases that you can fit your little lip gloss on, lip treatment on. And it's such a like, I think, key example of this like constant, persistent visual presence of brand. It's always there. Brands are in our comment sections interacting with us, not in a way that we used to see in the sort of millennial brand era, but in this like really sometimes borderline overbearing way where it's like, let people do people stuff and like go be a brand somewhere else. It's really been like super interesting to see. And like I said, I think we're coming to the precipice of what omnipresent brand could possibly mean, which is why I'm making this episode and like trademarking it now, because I think it's a really good way to put it. But I'm a little biased because I came up with it. Anyway, Rhode phone cases are such a bombastic example of how brand is something that we attach so much of our identity to, because if you think about it, a Rhode made phone case is not going to be the most protective of your iPhone, and also your iPhone is not really that sturdy. So the concept of putting a phone case made by a cosmetics company onto your phone so that you can show off your product in mirror selfies and videos is so incredibly interesting to me. It also shows up in like how we shop nowadays. There's this I've noticed this in the past year, and I've implemented this strategy as well. And I don't want us to get it confused with like a Supreme or a brand that sort of made its name running limited edition drops. But there's also this really interesting thing happening where brands are just rinse, washing, and repeating the same thing. They are reheating their own nachos over and over again, and people are lapping it up because the nachos are tasty and they don't feel like extending their palate beyond the nachos. That metaphor might have gotten a little bit lost, but what I mean to say there is people are so, again, ingrained in the brands that they view as being extensions of themselves, that they want them present at all times in their lives and in their homes, in their like personal fashion. It's so interesting. So yeah, those are my thoughts, my small theory on this move we're all making towards omnipresent brand. So I wanted to talk about and structure this series around how to really hit it home in this new landscape. If there is one thing I think all marketers and sort of folks who care about culture and sociology, if there's one thing we can all definitely agree on, it's that the millennial brand is dead. But I really don't see anyone talking about what is next. And so I think as people who are often brand operators, I would assume if you're listening to this podcast or subscribe to DTC, you probably do operate or touch a brand in some capacity. And I think what's really interesting about this point in time is that we all have the opportunity to be early in adopting what it's going to take for a brand to win coming into 2026, 2027, and beyond. So today's first episode, I wanted to sort of lay the landscape and give you guys a couple of tools directly that I use when I am thinking about brand and when I am trying to take what a brand is and morph it into this idea of omnipresent power and excitement and hype. I think it's important to not like tune out right now if you have a really well-developed brand book and you are maybe a brand director and you think about it all the time. I would caution you against that. Something that I have found incredibly helpful is absolutely destroying my ego when it comes to talking about content, creative, and brand itself. I think it is one of the most underrated skills you can have as someone who works in the sort of creative side of any vertical, to like let go, like I mentioned, of ego, just sort of smash it under your own foot and realize that you always have capacity to look at things a different way. And it's being open to seeing different viewpoints. That's really the magic in how you can create a brand that works. I am someone who likes to separate church and state. I honestly think that if you are creating like actual art, go for it. Go nuts with the ego. It is your point of view specifically that you're trying to get across if you're making art. But if you're making ads, it is really important to let other people's thoughts in and also to reevaluate like how you are thinking about things at all times. It's something, again, I have challenged myself to do again and again. I think we can like mix up the two acts because sometimes creating content can feel like an expression of ourselves, but it's really not. It's an expression of brand. So what I want to do today is good as all to go back to the basics and really think about what brand is in the context of existing in this omnipresent landscape. I will say before we get into this, if you've never really thought about like what your brand is, and also this is going to be really important as we move through these 3 episodes, If you also don't fully understand who you should be going after, who your target personas are, then you can head over to the Pilot House website and fill out a lead form. If you say that you came from this podcast, we can chat directly. If you don't want to talk to me because, I don't know, I make too many pooping and farting jokes, that's cool. You can talk to someone else at Pilot House as well. We have many experts on doing this. I am just one of them. But yeah, if you do want to chat with me directly, we can rip through your ad library. We can do a mini audit. You can just fill out the lead form, like I said, on the website, and then just let us know on that form that you came from, specifically the Ad-venturous podcast. If not, I'll still get you somewhere. If you just come in and don't say that, it's all good. The other thing I was going to say is you can also always feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I've been chatting with a couple of people, just looking at brands very quickly, and yeah, providing a couple of insights here and there. I will say if you do struggle and you don't have, like I mentioned, that set of target personas, then that's something you probably want to head over and fill out the lead form so we can chat about that. But yeah, two really important pieces that you sort of need before we start going on this little adventure. It's not necessary. I think hopefully you'll still learn some things if you don't have those pieces in play yet, but just want to do that shout out now because I am going to talk about personas quite a bit and just general brand identity as well. So that out of the way, something that I go back to over and over again when I'm working with a brand directly is the core brand identity. Something about that looks different for every single brand. Some people have a napkin that they scratched an idea on, and that is their brand identity. Some people have a whole brand book that they've built out, and they don't really get to what their brand identity is. Let's also do some definition and parameter setting here. Your brand identity is not the fonts that you use. It's not the colors that you use. It's not the churning that you prefer for your CTA buttons. Your brand identity needs to be much more magnetic than that. That is the best word I can think of. In 2025, the brands that I saw truly win were brands who were so sure of what their brand identity really is and truly what their story is in the world. To really succinctly do this, I've talked about this tool before. It's one of my favorite things in the world. It is called a message box. So I would recommend I just have to disclose this. I love that I get to talk about message boxes again because I love talking about them. It's such a good tool and nobody ever uses them, and they're so smart and they're so helpful and they're really easy. But a message box is just basically a way to frame a conversation around brand identity. So it's made up of 4 quadrants. It's more of a rectangle, to be honest. I didn't name it this. I inherited it from political strategists and borderline geniuses and psychopaths. So it's technically more of a rectangle when you draw it out, but I won't say anything. It's comprised of 4 sort of quadrants. So the first one is us on us. So what do we say about ourselves? So if I was doing a message box about myself as a person, I would say that I am generally quite optimistic and I really like Mitski and I am clumsy. And that is kind of what I say about myself. And I use those examples because I wanted to kind of prove a point, which is you should think about yourself in a well-rounded way. Don't just copy and paste what you would put in a brand book. You want to really dive into what do you say about yourselves? So if you are at a event and someone's asking you about what you do, what are the points that get you really fired up? For me, if I'm thinking about it in an actual work context, it would be I help brands scale through performance and brand as sort of equal partners in their journey of growth. And that is how I would describe myself to someone when I'm excited to talk about it and feeling it. So you want to get down everything that you sort of understand about your brand so that it's just on paper. And sometimes I think when people do this, again, it's you think, oh, I know it all. But you want to be creating net new ideas for yourself and net new ways of thinking about things. So I really encourage people to do this on pen and paper. I do it on my iPad. Shout out to my iPad. I love to talk about my iPad every single episode if I can. It's not sponsored. If you don't have an iPad though, it changed my life. I love my iPad, but I do it on my iPad, so I'm physically writing with my pencil. But it's also a great thing to do pen and paper. There's something I think that comes to us when we're actually writing with our hands instead of typing. So I would write it out, like get in there, move. If you've got a whiteboard in the office, do a big one on the whiteboard. I have done that. It's very fun. So first quadrant, us on us, just, I know you've thought about your brand 1,000 times. Do the actual exercise. Don't take it from somewhere else. Don't look at your brand book. Do it completely organically. Like, how do you describe yourself as a brand? The next quadrant is going to be them on them. I've talked about the message box before in terms of like trying to use it to just build better angles. Today, we're talking about it in how to build relevancy. So them on them is actually going to be about your target persona. I would recommend if you have I have a brand that I work with. We've got like 3 really strong personas and we message to all of them all the time. It's fabulous. I'm living the dream. But if you have multiple personas like we do, I would recommend doing a message box for each one. Some of the information like us on us, you can take over from brand box to brand box, but I think it's good to set them apart by persona if that is relevant to you. But them on them, you should really think about who your target persona is for either the full brand or this one chunk of it. And so what do they think about themselves? Like if we're thinking again about that Hailey Bieber phone case, it's like if we're thinking them on them in the Rhode zeitgeist, it's like, yeah, obviously they do be taking pictures of themselves. They do be making TikToks. I know because I'm there. I'm part of that persona. And so I think it's a really like interesting way to think about it. It's like if they were making a message box about their target persona, one of the things that might come up in them on them is like they are always on those darn phones, and that is true. How do we get the product top of mind? We attach it to the thing that's always in their freaking hand. Genius. So them on them, you really want to break it down, like I said, by persona, and just how do these people think about themselves? How do they talk about themselves? And make sure, again, you actually get it down and you write it all in your message box. Next is them on us. What do they think about us as a brand? I'm going to stop using myself as an example because that was kind of weak sauce. I'm going to use Rhode because I think it's a much better way to explain this process for you guys. But if we look at them on us as a box and we think about how folks in the Rhode target persona, which again is me, hello, part of what a lot of people sort of hold about Rhode is that it's cool. Hailey Bieber is cool. We like what she does. And so there's like a really interesting thing that starts to happen, I think, as a brand operator when you start to genuinely think about like what do the people we're going after actually think about us? Not in a review way, not in a kind of just general customer experience way, but what do they think about us as a brand? Because that's where the real meat and potatoes to this exercise is going to be. So again, forget about any kind of reviews you've seen and forget about the like customer experience type of stuff. So if you have really fast shipping, it's like, don't put that in this box. That is for another time. Good job, by the way. We love that. But think about like, how do they actually hold you as a brand? What do they think about you? What are the I sometimes like to do like a mixed media brand think piece. And I don't know why that took me so long. I honestly do know why it took me so long. I was looking at a bird outside of my window. But I like to do a little mixed media, and sometimes I'll attach imagery. And I think that a lot of brands, it's like that can be very helpful. It's like what comes to people's minds when they shop with your brand or when they think about shopping with it. It's just like, what does it really hold for your actual target persona? And then the last box, and it doesn't really matter what order you fill these out. I always like to start with us on us and then them on them. And the other 2 you can do in any order you want. But the next one is going to be us on them. What do we say about our target persona? And this one can be really, really interesting. And I think that it starts to become really apparent, like where gaps are once you have all of this filled out. But I do think us on them is very interesting in the context of a brand and their sort of target persona. It's like, what do we genuinely, this is where I typically go when I'm filling this out, but again, feel free to just like blank page it, put whatever you want on there. But what I start to think about is like, what do we actually offer them? So a good example for this box, if we're using Rhode as an example, is like a little bit of a shift in the sort of skincare and cosmetics market towards like a very glazed donut type of look. And so what Rhode and Hailey Bieber really capitalized on was the fact that nobody in the market was really servicing that makeup look intentionally, especially in North America. There are other sort of K-beauty brands that were, but especially in North America, for the following that Hailey Bieber has, nobody was really filling that gap. And so the us on them becomes very interesting because, again, it's like if you focus it on what you're solving, I think that the information that you will start sort of pouring out onto the page becomes very helpful. So like I said, really interesting to think about like the problem side of it and what you're solving for them and how you're solving that for them through this idea of what do we say about them. So for Rhode, in this example, it could be they are really excited about the new sort of glazed donut trend coming into skincare. They're really focused on ease of use for products. I would say that's a big one for me. I love a pocket blush. And they are looking to sort of be ahead of the trend, I think is another really good way to put this box for Rhode specifically. And so all those things are going to help like come up with what our actual brand identity is. So what I like to do after I put together a message box is I kind of step away from it for a bit because I think sometimes I was just having this conversation with a colleague the other day. You get so close to brands when you work with them. It's really difficult, especially like when you found them and it's your brand. Like you get so close to what it is. So I like to get everything out in one session and then leave it for like 2 to 3 days and then kind of come back to it, see how I'm feeling. If you're listening, I'm doing kind of a loosey-goosey dance. I like to see how I'm feeling, look at my own work, and think about what is one sentence that I could take away that kind of encapsulates everything in this message box. That is the goal of the message box, is to get all the information out there, see it in that like quadrant format, and then be able to come up with a single sentence that helps define your actual brand identity. So you'll notice a lot of the things that I mentioned that are not your brand identity are really not part of the message box because they're not part of the general like brand experience. And the reason that I wanted to kind of come back to message boxes today and start this series off with this tool is because I do think it would be really helpful to like fill this out for yourself as we talk about some big theoretical ad-based ideas over the next couple of weeks, because it'll help really tether these big cultural shifts and these big industry-wide disruptions. It'll help tether it to your actual brand, and it will help create like a more actionable experience for you. So to give you kind of a preview of next week, we're going to talk about Dadaism, which is an art movement which was born after the First World War and is so whack. And we're going to talk about Dadaism, we're going to talk about 6-7, and we're going to talk about like what is going on the internet in this day and age, because I think that's really important to get our minds around. And then the third episode, we're going to talk about the relationship between Norman Rockwell and advertising, which is also really interesting. We're going to talk about this sort of pinpoint of art and ads and how that is relevant to us moving into 2026 and how it will help us really stay relevant as brands, which is what you need. If you think about the ties between being seen as omnipresent in a feed and omnipresent out in the world as a brand, what you need to accomplish that is relevancy. So relevancy is sort of the sneak attack point of the next few episodes. And yeah, I wanted to start today off with like, I guess a piece of homework is a good way to put it, because it is, I think, going to make the like information we go over in the next couple of episodes more useful to you and more applicable. And yeah, like I mentioned at the top here, I do this stuff every single day. It is like how I fill my days. I feel like I'm acting like I never say that, but I talk about making ads like all the time on this podcast, but it is how I fill my days. I'm not just talking about it, I am doing it. And everything we're going to go through is like directly from my experiences operating brands this year and the successes that I saw like implementing these strategies and this thought process as well. So yeah, like I mentioned, I'm in the trenches too. It has been a really complicated year for e-commerce and DTC, but I have seen like huge success, and I want to share like the thought process that got me there with you guys. And like I mentioned, the next couple episodes are going to be a little more philosophical. So I think if you just get that sort of message box down and really ingrain yourself in what your brand identity is, it's going to be a lot easier to hold on to it as we go through some of the like larger, big, like I mentioned, cultural shifts and industry disruptions. That also, I think I've structured these episodes in this way because that models like how I came to the way that I create content for brands now and the strategy that I deploy. It started with doing exactly what I've outlined here, which is a message box that really gets at the brand identity and really focuses on target personas. And also, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, if you're really not sure who those target personas are, I get that it would be difficult to do a message box. So yeah, definitely feel free to reach out. And I'd be happy to take a look at the brand and chat about like how we go about developing personas and strategy around personas at Pilot House, because it's like made such an enormous difference. It's really like you can't even measure it. I mean, technically you could, but it has made such an insane incremental difference to the brands who have adopted our strategy. And it's like really just cool to see. And I'm excited to talk about it more. Thanks so much for listening today. That was a lot. I guess I say that every week because it is just me talking for like 30 minutes at a time. But I hope that was helpful. And yeah, like I mentioned, next week we're going to talk about Dadaism, which is really fun. This is really, I don't know if my boyfriend's going to listen to this, but if I'm going to talk about Dadaism, I do want to quickly say, very funny story. One time we went to a museum and I saw a Duchamp like piece and I was so excited and enamored. And he was like, that's nothing. It's just an object. So I think that is a really funny sneak peek for next week's episode, which is all about Dadaism, modern internet, and like what actually works from a content point of view. But yeah, thanks so much for listening, and I will chat to you guys next week.